Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Akil, and I love this episode because we talk about leadership, openness, empathy, transparency, and how to do that being in a position like that, as well as cultivate talent to grow into those positions. Joining me today is Keeya Wang-Jones, and I love her perspective. I think you'll love it too. Enjoy.
Beyond coding.
But you mentioned one of the IKEA regions. I don't know the name, but what region was it responsible for?
So, for Ingka, it's responsible for a lot of the digital coworker and customer-facing products.
Yeah.
So, for example, we started in 2019. I think a year before that, but in 2019 we were pushing out the IKEA app.
Yeah.
For shopping. Also, during the digital transformation, it's just a lot of like reassessing where the needs are, and a lot of technology that may have been used 20 years ago.
Okay.
Like, how do we modernize that to how coworkers use the products to communicate with people today?
Yeah.
Right. One of the factors of that is that customers were understanding more about the product than the coworkers.
Yeah.
So my goal was to give the coworkers the same experience as the customers. So that way it's past the measurements, color, but more of like how do you want to use this furniture in your home? Like, what makes you desirable to this one versus another one?
Yeah.
So there's more of a communication between it and not always just the facts about the furniture. That builds relationships, and it also carries through to every department of the store, right?
Yeah.
And there's a trust factor there. And then there's a trust factor between coworker communicating with another coworker. So if I trust you to handle this customer because I need to go do other coworker things, then you have every information that you have to continue that conversation without the customer starting all over again.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing about the shopping experience, right? Is I want to buy something, I'm super inspired. Okay, now I have to tell my story all over again to catch you up so that you can help me. And that was sort of like holding things up. And we wanted to empower the coworkers to be able to have the information they need at the time that they need and transfer it when they need to.
The feeling I get most from that, I have to explain everything again, is either when I have a customer complaint or when I'm even talking to a recruiter. It's like those are the avenues where I think I have to. I'm talking to a different colleague now. I have to do my whole story again. Basically.
Exactly, and I think when human linguistics, when you're trying to speak, you're dealing with a lot of personalities, right? And that also is with the customer. That customer might be introverted. That customer might be extroverted. That customer may have different ideas and they're just skipping over.
Yeah.
And then the coworker's like trying to follow. So when you're having these conversations and you're like want to give the best customer service experience, it is good to have as much information, but also that freedom to have a conversation and both enjoying that shopping experience together.
Yeah.
And I believe that, because I was a global position, so any decisions we were making has to be distributed across all the different markets. And then in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're designing a customer and coworker journey meeting points that make sense to their journey mapping. So a lot of journey mapping creations, a lot of testing, user testing with the coworkers as well as the customers, and then really understanding like what services are supporting both.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest part of my job, was to not only help build the digital organization from the ground up, because we were doing a digital transformation, but also transferring some of that knowledge over to the coworker side so we understand a little bit how to make their lives easier.
Yeah.
And that was like a beautiful thing to do.
Awesome.
The other fun fact is I used to be a coworker on the floor.
Really cool.
So I was selling like sofas, building them, and I would go through these experiences where everyone comes in with this huge happy shopping theory of what they want. And then I have to kind of go through all the furniture options, right? But I love having fun with the customers to understand their story more, because then I can guide them to the right kind of sofa to try out, right?
Of course.
And then I'm also an introvert, so I'm an ambivert. So I like to go hide downstairs and work on as is furniture. And for me, that was the way of being sustainable at the time before we started to really think about sustainability. And this is many years ago. But it was a way of understanding it from the back end of like logistics and, this is how I help people. This is how I build the furniture. This is how I also still talk to customers from a different context. And you start to see the gaps start to close the more you interact with different types of customers and coworkers alike. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And in the digital space, it's just...
That's very unique, I think.
It's very unique. Exactly.
Yeah, I think...
Yeah.
But I think it's very powerful to have that history and understanding because, I mean, with every product you're building, digital product, physical product, it serves a purpose, right? Yeah. And usually that purpose is also related to people. Yeah. Especially when it comes to digital, understanding the use case, understanding and putting yourself in the shoes of the user in that way, I think it's phenomenal. It's a skill that we need to do from a software development point of view, from a business point of view, kind of all around in the cycle of creating that product.
Absolutely.
For you to be able to deliver the best product for that customer.
I think the more our engineers and designers have the customer experience, the more empathy we will have.
Yeah.
And as some of those use cases that we're trying to solve for, it becomes a little bit more of a realistic problem. So we start to think about what's a problem market fit, right? Instead of the product market fit. Like, what is the problem we're actually really trying to solve? And that goes beyond coding, right? Like, you have to live the experience a bit, at least 25% of it.
Yeah.
So that as you're building it, I think instinctually writing code, you're like, wait, I'm making an if-else statement and it doesn't make sense. It could be the most beautiful code ever.
Yeah.
But I'm going to deploy this. It doesn't make sense. I think that sometimes, especially in larger enterprise companies where startups, you play multiple hats. So you might be an engineer that day, but you also might be a QA person the next week, right?
Yeah.
But in enterprise companies, you can kind of get siloed into your positions a bit. What I did like about IKEA is that we had a 80-20. So 80% you're on you're in your area, your domain, knowledge area. And then 20% you're expanding and learning somewhere else. So I really love that because I'm not one of those leaders that want to incubate a person for so long and not see them grow in other skills, especially from a product design experience level. The UX umbrella is so huge now.
Yeah.
You should get experience in different parts of it to hone into the skills that you really want. And I believe that the 80-20 rule, and some organizations still do this, is that you're handling your responsibilities with the same passion, but you have 20% to go explore.
Yeah.
And I've found it to be quite proven that that person, when they go to another side of the company or domain or another cross-functional team, they take that 20% of what they learned and they impact what they're already doing in the 80%.
Yeah.
They come with more thoughts. They come with more strategy. They start to think a little bit outside of their comfort zone. And that's like really good for business. It's good for managers. It's good for like the goal of the 5-year North Star vision or whatever that plan is. And I believe that it also helps the people feel like I'm being purposeful. I'm being utilized, and I'm seeing the impact that I'm making versus like just only this is what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Please be careful with the table because I think the mic might pick it up if you bump into the thing. But I think what you laid out aligns a lot with what we do here at this organization at Keeya, because we get evenings to share knowledge, and the knowledge can be around anything. So if my main focus, my 80%, let's say, is on software development, we get innovation days where we can hack around, and we get knowledge sharing evenings where we can talk about other stuff. And I do feel like that helps with the growth of the people, right? That helps with kind of finding your space within this organization, because you need to feel like you belong and you matter for you to truly be effective in what you do. I feel like one bleeds into the other. From the perspective of kind of mentoring those people and fostering their growth, did you always have to encourage them to kind of find what was outside of their 80% in that 20%, let's say? Because I also work with people, and sometimes I've experienced people kind of having struggles figuring out what to then kind of spend their time on when it comes to that 20% exploring.
Yeah. So I typically do this, especially when I finished the level of mid-level and I started to be a senior and I started to now get experience with leading teams a bit.
Yeah.
There's a practice that I do, and I do it also because I used to teach at the Art Institute in San Diego, California.
Yeah.
And I want to assess where people's confidence level is.
Okay.
And what I do is I typically create sort of like this spider web diagram that is, let's just say, the UX umbrella. These are all the skill sets currently now based on UX.
Yeah.
And I have them gauge their confidence level of where they are. So, for example, if it's UX research and they're like, I only had maybe 1 or 2 tries of that. I don't feel confident that I can do that. That's about maybe 10% of where I want to be. And then what is the primary things? I really enjoy interaction design. I'm going to put that 80% there. So we try to put a number to their confidence level. And then as they grow, I try to give them projects. And then there's a little bit more of a concrete understanding of where they want to be. So there's a lot to go behind that. One is really understanding the personality of the person.
Yeah.
Pulling out the things that they have interest in, even if they think that they might not be good at it, giving them the courage to step out of their comfort zone, try it out. And then lastly is that we go back after they try these few skills, look at that chart again, wipe it. Now tell me where your confidence level is. And it helps track, and they can see it. This is where I've worked on this project. I do this a lot because, especially for the African-American community, Latin American, people of color, we will get happy in the sense that, yes, I got my first job. This is what I'm going to do. And we get very comfortable with that because I think it's a little bit more of like just history. We don't want to rock the boat too much, but we want to learn because we're also very ambitious. In order to do that, what's missing is just the knowledge gap and that confidence and being able to see someone that you can confide into, that you basically see yourself in them, helps you able to kind of have that courage to go more. And I feel like that's what I bring to the table every job that I have.
Yeah.
And I look at that talent. I'm always trying to find what is the hidden gem of this individual that I just push a little bit, show them a few different, give them a few different exercises. Then we can probably navigate their career development from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, there's conferences and things like that to spark, joy and inspiration. But in the job, I want to make sure they're taking on projects that pushes their comfort zone a bit.
Awesome. I've done an exercise like that actually in a training where we had this spider diagram, and you had to place, indeed, like you say, what is your kind of current level of competency, or where do you estimate it to be? And then also, what's on the horizon? What do you want to work on? And I love that exercise. It's kind of like, it's many years ago, so I've never picked that up, but I think it's a great exercise to figure out what you want to work on then. Because people within the field will understand all the aspects around the circle, will understand kind of where they are and what they still need to work on or what they want to work on in that way. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think when you're looking at this diagram, there's a lot of thoughts, right? There's your confidence level. There's even the part where I can gauge when I watch, like I'm physically watching this person trying to make that decision, is we judge ourselves harsher than we really are, right? Like you could be a kick-ass in web development, but you're like, but I'm just not as good as John. So you mark yourself a little lower. Yeah. Right? So those are those silent areas that I try to pick out because I want to know, why do you feel you're at a 3? So I ask questions very much about trying to get them to understand what is holding them back. Yeah. And a lot of times it's comparing themselves with someone else versus like, okay, this is truly where I'm at. The other parts that I do is there are certain certifications online, but also just like really quick, like you said earlier, is little quick exercises. Try and solve this problem, or take this small certification. It's free. See like just an assessment of where you are from a book logistics of learning. Yeah. And then the next part, which is the best part I feel is the most fun, is we're figuring out your passion. Yeah. Right? Like we now know you thought you were at a 3 with web development, but you're at a 5. We've got some score from some certification, right? But where's your passion in that? Yeah. And there's, I didn't really think about, but I know my passion's in front-end design. okay, then let's start getting you more on these front end projects so you can actually get the skill sets underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just helps things much smoother. They feel like they're validated. They feel like they're contributing. And then it's like, yay. And then I feel good because I'm like, this is all like selfish of me because I just want to feel good about you growing. Yeah. I want that fulfillment for myself that you're doing well.
Yeah, I get that. I think more and more, the more interactions I have with people, the more I realize that one of my passions is also kind of experiencing that fulfillment, giving back in terms of perspective or experience or advice, and just being there also for support along the way. Yeah. I think it fulfills me, and it will always fulfill me. At least that's my perspective now. What I do find challenging is from the starting point of, okay, this is my passion and this is what I want to grow in, then I can really help because then we kind of know what this passion is. But from the point where it's kind of still undefined, that is a bit of a harder standpoint, I feel like, because then from my standpoint, I'm like, then we're going to try a lot, because from trying a lot, you learn what you don't like, and then you get closer to what you do like at the end. Is that also kind of your approach, or what is your approach?
It is true because, I mean, when we think about tech, there's so much.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, and we try to sort of label it, right? Full stack developer, front end, back end, security, AI, right? So, and we keep building more titles. So I feel that when people try a lot, they're going to hone into things they're really, really passionate about, and then things they're really, really good at and what they're really, really bad at, right? I think as a leader, when we're thinking about learning and development, we want to always educate how to stay up on the trends and what's brand new, right? Metaverse versus AI. Okay, metaverse and AI, right? I think when I kind of gauge that sort of development, I want to put in one particular difference that I've noticed is I want the people that are learning from me or looking up to me in any ways to learn the business side of it. So that when you're playing with different technology, it's fun, right? But what is some of the business impact that you'll make?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the doer versus like, okay, business executive leaders and from leads to directors to senior directors and so forth, is that information or that kind of knowledge is missing.
Yeah.
Because we've been playing and doing and producing at this level versus being able to now say, how do we actually get a return on investment on this?
Yeah, strategy,
right, exactly. And that's the skill set no matter what level that person's at. I want them to learn even at the junior level what strategy is. Because if you don't, we always say get a seat at the table. But if you're coming from a marginalized group of people, especially people of color, you might not get that seat at the table right away. Yeah. But you still should have a very strong sense of strategy. So by the time that, if that is a desire, you are not kind of catching up on it. You're learning like cost and benefit analysis.
Yeah, I know that.
Right? Like if you're learning like, I want to change frameworks here, but what's the cost if we go from AWS to DigitalOcean to all these other different like platforms? If we put in Kubernetes now, is that the right time? And then what is it going to cost us a few years later? Or is it good enough for what we're trying to do in this moment? Yeah. And that I really push into my leadership. Some people like it. Some people are like, that's just so too much. It's out of my, it's overwhelming. And then it's a little bit more of like, okay, personality balance. Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic point because I feel like it allows you to have kind of that overarching picture of how it works in this organization and even in how it works either in our domain or in other organizations in that way. And you carry that with you probably in the way that you execute. Because most of the time you're coming from a place of execution. You start as someone that executes. Yep. And for you to understand the bigger picture of things, you can challenge certain ideas, certain propositions, certain just literally what you have to do that day, just by virtue of understanding. And then that understanding can sometimes get addicting as well. You want to do more of it or you want to be in control, have those discussions and make those decisions then yourself as well. But you can only get to that point if you have the understanding of how things work here.
Yes, absolutely. 100, Patrick, because I think that when we don't have a full understanding, because most organizations, you have top level, C-suite, they have their North Star vision. Yeah. They're going to be like, this is where you want to be in 5 years, in 3 years, right? And then you have middle management.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we going to take this huge, fluffy strategy and make sense out of it to deliver some sort of product or cue or tertial sort of like plan, right? Then you have the doers who are like, all right, this is all so cool. I don't really know why we're doing this, but when we blend those together in an adaptive approach, then you have everyone understanding and is aligned.
Yeah.
I think there's an advantage of startups being able to have to be aligned all the time, cost, and then also like how much can we really explore. And then there's the enterprise level that's like, okay, whatever the CEO is having here, it has to be adapted all the way down. And then you have the huge jobs to be done kind of concept. But I noticed that even through whatever size of the company, the learners at the bottom, the doers, are missing out on why. And we're just producing, like you said, we're just executing. We're going home like, I just wrote the best closure clause, right? And I just made the best UX experience for an interaction flow, and we accomplished these use cases, but not knowing like, well, how does it really impact the journey of the company and the user and so forth. So I typically, when I'm internally leading teams, I want them to know. And I pretty much make it very transparent. This is what the CEO is thinking. This is what our middle management is thinking. This is what our products and services are. Now, with this knowledge and what you're working on, how can we do things differently? How can we push the level a bit?
I love that. Yeah.
So
that's the knowledge part, let's say, from cultivating talent into leadership. What do you focus on from kind of a behavioral point of view or even a skills point of view?
Communication. Yeah, and I think it's even more predominant in my mind living internationally.
Okay.
Because there's, there's just context. I think as an American from California, there's a lot of, I have to be more cognitive about or cautious about my references.
Okay.
And they might be movie references.
Yeah,
they might be
culture.
song references or cultural references. And I'm like, I don't think they understood what I said.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm like, when I speak, I do have a little bit of that urban professionalism to myself. And I love that. That's my authentic self, right? I'm like, do you get me? Do I get you?
Yeah.
Let's get it, right? And there's, get what?
Yeah, I get
That's like, okay, maybe, okay. And then I'll end up making a joke, right? Like, let's push this, right? Like,
I love that.
Right? In case of emergency, like, let's commit.
Yeah.
So it's a fun thing to do, but at the same time, when you're communicating across these multiple languages, these different contexts, these different nuances, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So I depend on a lot of communication. And it could be asynchronous communication. So they can have like less meetings, right? But at the same time, I'm a very visual person. And it's not just visual when people kind of think of that as UX, like visual design, UX, and UI. It's not that. It's more like, how are we going to build out these schematic flows? How are we going to, even in our workflows, Patrick, you're going to hand over this piece of code development, but how are we going to make that flow all the way through?
Yeah.
And if you need to pull back, do we have a way of actually making sure you can pull that back? So it's very much of the communication across. And then it's even more intense when it's business and really having to understand the costs, the analysis, the resources, the time deadlines, the goals. So communication is like the biggest key. And I know that in our resumes and all the job requisitions that are being posted, it's like, soft skills. I think communication is a very hard skill.
Yeah, I agree. I even think about, I fully align that communication is one of the biggest factors that I've seen for teams being successful, for organizations being successful in kind of a high-paced environment. And then if I think, how do you work on communication other than by doing? Because that's like my default mode is like I practice and the practice makes more and more perfect, even though it's never going to be perfect. But how otherwise can you work on communication?
Yeah, I just took a really great certification from GitLab. It's called Team Ops. And I really resonated on how they do it. One, because of the atmosphere of future of work that we're all doing remote work, we're doing hybrid works, we're doing in office. And I really love that their biggest motto is just transparency. The CEO makes videos explaining the company's position,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just in your GitLab type of hub. It's very much of like on YouTube.
Out and open.
Right. Yeah, it's out and open, and everything is out and open.
Fantastic.
And that's for all the success that I've had in my career, I've been pushing a lot of that kind of transparency because one, we make mistakes to fail fast so we can succeed.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's also things that like, okay, we could have probably avoided that one if we just actually sat down or we put up a hackathon and we try some new things, or we, have our sprint and we go through a retrospective, like how did this sprint, what happened? What we could have done better? What should we do the next time? Because everyone has our own voices in our head. And if you're very introverted, you have your voices in your head and you're just like, okay, I just need to process this in a different manner. If you're extroverted, you're thinking out loud and you're like, this is kind of how I do things. But when you put everyone together and whether it's virtually, just making sure that the documentation is clean.
Yeah.
Someone's also like it's a living documentation. All the workflows of ways of working is communicated, and then it's just super out there. If you miss a meeting because of, and this is where inclusivity comes in, you miss a meeting because you have a child that's sick. Oh, it's too bad you missed that part of your meeting. I'm not going to explain it again. I think that's ridiculous, to be honest with you. It's just like people have situations that happen. They shouldn't be judged by that.
Yeah.
It's not like they don't have the passion to help. Circumstances happen. We're
Life
humans at the
happens.
end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So where can this person on their own time get the same documentation and catch up, right? So I think that's something that we all kind of take for granted, of thinking that someone else is going to do the way we do things, and it doesn't work that way.
No.
Everyone's brain works differently, as we notice, different neurodivergence, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I feel like the success is always about how transparent the company is.
I like that a lot. I think like you, I'm an advocate for transparency, and I don't find it in every environment I am in. But from a position where I can now do more, I want to be as transparent as possible. To give you an example, I wanted to do this business case within this organization, and I was like, okay, I need to get buy-in. But to get buy-in, I have to write a business plan. So I wrote down everything out in the open. I put it in my chat. I got feedback from colleagues. Everything was out in the open. And then we got the go-ahead. So then I was like, okay, now that we can do this, I have budget, I have time, I'm going to document everything as openly as I can. Now, this was late end of 2022, and the initiative would have started, or did start actually, in January this year.
Okay.
And we hired people because of it. Now, this whole process, even to the point of how much salary they're going to get, the choices we've made with regards to education and stuff like that, everything was out in the open. So then I talked to the people actually a few weeks back, and they were like, is this information, like, where can I find it? And I was like, here's all the link. Like, it's out in the open. Everyone knows it's in the open.
Yes.
I wanted to do it as best I could with regards to transparency, because I feel like that helps. That helps for understanding. People can go and read it in their own time, can ask questions about it, and they're not in the kind of unknown, because I feel like being in a position where you have a lot of unknowns, it's not a comfortable position to be in, and it's a hard position to thrive in, actually.
100% agree, because I think also too, when we're that transparent, we're creating loyalty with our fellow coworkers.
Yeah.
Right. We're creating trust. We're creating a safe space. And then I think that helps just overall. Like, I love the idea of as transparent as I am, and we can change things if it doesn't work, versus like not being as transparent. And I think there is a part of a self-awareness of how much transparency are we actually doing, because I can throw something up on, let's just say, Confluence, right? Thinking I'm very transparent. But what I love about what you said is you're getting feedback on it.
Yeah.
Because now you have other eyes reading on it and being able to kind of collaborate on this whole entire initiative.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really beautiful, because I think that's where it's like, how come anyone didn't tell me about this? Or I didn't know, and I just went and built this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that transparency helps with the safe space, but it also kind of gives the go-ahead to do something.
I agree. Yeah. And I like that you also mentioned the more people we have, like the more eyes we have on this, the brains are diverse. The more brains we have, the better the output, like the end product and the idea will be at the end of the day, right? because you're going to have communication, you're going to have feedback. This thing you're building, all of a sudden you're co-creating. And just by virtue of doing it together, I think the end result will almost always be better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it shows into the product, and it even shows even more when it gets to the end user. You're like, that was team effort.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Feels good.
Feels really good.
Yeah.
Who's up for rock climbing? Because we kicked ass on that one.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to kind of environments that are not as transparent, have you seen organizations that are too transparent, or what would usually be a hurdle in being transparent in the first place?
I don't know if there's a real hurdle. I think, if anything, when organizations are not transparent and are going through a digital transformation, and a lot of that times those transformations include hiring and laying people off, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where it hurts not to be as transparent. It's not a hurdle in the sense of, but I think it can be if it's just not the exact truth coming out, and the more you leave open for people to use their own thoughts, their own vices, it's worse for the company, right? So I think that's typically where I find it to be the toughest, when the company itself is going through a huge digital transformation.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's a balance to that, right?
Yeah, I think the more room for interpretation, the more room for like wrong assumptions, and people act based on those assumptions, right?
Yeah.
However subjective they might be, it does kind of influence what someone does or feels at the end of the day, which might then impact kind of their environment, their surroundings, and then the surroundings of those surroundings can kind of cascade in that way. That's a rough one.
Yeah, and it's hard to manage too, right? Because I think that, like, one of these cases, we were doing the reorg, and everyone was coming to, like, I would say it's like a trappan, and in Swedish is the stairs, the main stairs, and everyone's learning about UX. But I think that when I hired, it was people that were already doing the work and learning.
Yeah.
And that was my transparency with them, is that if you're already learning these skill sets, then sure, come talk to me. Let's do an informational interview. Let's see, like, if there's mostly internal first, because of the digital transformation, versus I'm going to take the key points out of this presentation and I'm going to try and use that. And there's no real passion behind it, because I believe when we don't kind of nurture a good space to be transparent and create that safe space, then it leaves people to kind of really intense their survival mode.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work well for whether it's a digital transformation, whether it's brand new on the job, you're on a probational period, so you already have the stress of, I have to prove myself all the time. And then there's okay, I'm working on a new project. But if you're starting off with a culture of some transparency, then you're approachable. And someone that really desires to see themselves longer relationship with the company, they can come to you and say, yes, hey, Patrick, I know that there's a digital transformation going on. I'm really strong here, but I really am curious about this.
Yeah.
I would like to know if there's anyone you know within a company that can help mentor me, right? Before it's at the edge of, like, okay, now I have to figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I believe that comes a lot to just the good and bad of transparency. But for the most part, I think transparency is always good. I'd rather know what's going on.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Whether I stay with the company, whether I'm laid off, I just want to know what's going on so that I know what my options are, and I can navigate my own emotions through the transitional time.
Yeah, and I can offer help.
I can offer help.
I understand now. That makes one of the interesting thought experiments I was thinking about is, I think sometimes you can find yourself in an organization where they're not as fan of transparency as you and I are. But let's say you get into a position of leadership where others like look up to you from that position, and you want to create that change. You want to make the organization more transparent. How do you start and kind of move an organization towards a vision of transparency that you have?
Well, I do have my conversations at the top level, just so that I understand. As much as I want to be transparent, I ask questions. Why don't you want me to be transparent here?
Yeah.
What's the blocker, or what's the holdup? Because sometimes it could be legal.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It could be the context of legalities. All right, now I know that. And then what I do is, like you said, there's your lunch and learn, there's the brownish, but I take my team and I kind of tell them what's going on and where opportunities are, or where it's going to change, or just the simple, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, But if we want to discuss it, you want to talk about it, we can.
Yeah.
Because especially through transformations, things change on a dime, right? You have, let's hire quickly. Okay, hiring freeze. And as we're living in this climate today, right? So as much as I can understand from a top level, the executive suite, even to the senior director levels, I can be able to gauge the conversation with my team as transparent as I can be with the information that I have.
Yeah. I love that. That's true lead by example.
Yeah, exactly.
What other behavioral aspects do you kind of cultivate within the people you're mentoring or look for within your leadership?
I'm always about boosting your skills. Like, what is it that you need to work on? Just in case you have to move around quite a lot, right? But within leadership, I try to push a lot of people empathy. But I do have a rule. And that rule is pretty much for all my leaders, we can't teach ambition or motivation. We can inspire, but we can't, what is the saying? Here it is, being very American. You get a little taste of it now.
Okay.
You lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
I know
right?
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I put all my energy in, but if I feel that I'm putting more energy in than the person themselves, then I'm going to move on to the next.
Okay.
And that's very transparent. And I say that anytime I join a brand new team, this is how I lead. This is my expectations right away. And it kind of grounds everyone to understand what kind of leader I am.
Yeah.
I'm approachable. I will see the best benefit in you. I will even sponsor some of you that are really like, I want to move on. I want to be able to do this certain skill set, or I want to grow in a certain manner, especially for employee resource groups like ERG groups, or another term is business resource groups for safe spaces, marginalized groups of people, right?
Yeah.
These are areas that I really bond to see them grow. But the moment I get someone that just likes the idea, it's like a little bit of a write-off to me. And I'm sure HR, but you can't just tell your people that it's a write-off, right? You're done.
Yeah.
But I have to tell them to be transparent. Like I can't help make you be inspired or motivated.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can inspire if you're willing to listen and see, but I can't motivate you. Like I can't tell you conversational AI is a key piece for UX writing. I give you that nugget. I expect you to go.
Interesting.
I want to go learn about conversational AI and how I can use it in UX or product design or business requirements, right? And I think that's where, with all of this, there's boundaries. And that part I am working on myself, because my heart is like, I want to help you.
Yeah.
I want to see you grow, especially if they're coming from marginalized groups where they're being underrepresented. I want to see you grow, but I make it a clear-cut rule. I cannot teach you to be ambitious.
I love that. Yeah. One of the reasons I asked that, also because I'm looking forward, and I can see sometimes working with people that just want to coast, that are happy with what they are, and that sometimes I would say that the ambition is kind of lacking, at least if I compare it to myself. I've always said, when I join an organization, I want to grow as fast as possible. I still kind of have that drive, like it has ups and downs, but that is always like, I want to grow. I want to see what's next. I want to do more. I always have kind of that feeling, that urge. People ask me where it comes from. I have no clue. Maybe it has to do with my upbringing. I always saw my parents do a lot.
Okay.
But if I don't see that in someone, then like you, I'm like, I want to help. We can do something. Like I always have kind of this high hope of we can do something. But I like your full honesty and kind of tough love in being like, but these are the ground rules, right? If this doesn't work, then maybe it's a mismatch for you and me. Maybe it's just a mismatch in general. And I really like that. I might have to adopt that. But that's tough.
Yeah. It's tough, but I think it's fair.
I also think so.
Right. Especially the first day someone joins the team. I try to give as much expectations coming from my end, what I expect.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait until your job review.
It's too late.
Right. It's too late. Yeah. Right. Some companies a year, some companies is 6 months.
Yeah.
You could have told, like I felt always when I got those reviews, like, why didn't you be honest with me where I can grow or what I can fix or what I can do?
In the moment.
Or right when it happens, or maybe you wait 24 hours and tell me the next day, right? But 6 months from now, I'm still trying to figure out what I did last week.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have to recollect what happened then. Yeah.
with my emotions, and maybe there's resentment there, and I pushed it so low underneath because that's culturally like, okay, you can't be shaking the boat too much, right?
Yeah.
And I think to your point, it's like again, to our transparency, let me know what's going on, even if it's tough, but it's fair, and give that person responsibility or choice to either, be nurtured by that straight up advice, or just observation, right? Or they make the decision that's best for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way we can, especially in our tech industry where things are moving so fast. At the same time, we're slow and trying to figure things out. The worst thing I feel that anyone can do is give someone that review of 6 months and have it affect their ability to fix in the year or at the end of the year and be like, and it affects their pay, it affects their, benefits.
Yeah.
That's just way too much cost. From a business perspective, that's a lot of cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It can impact the motivation for the whole coming period, let's say.
Yeah.
And just by virtue of bunching up that information, giving it at the end as kind of a period review, that's kind of a horrible period. Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so horrible.
Yeah, exactly. That's very hard.
And then they talk to each other and they're like, man, did you get your review? Do you even agree? And you're like, the feedback was supposed to help you, but it's a year later.
It's a critique
So
and you can't do anything about
exactly.
it. Yeah, it has impact. That's rough. In kind of mentoring this group then that is ambitious, that wants to grow really fast, let's say their vision is set on your position or leadership positions, people of management, people that help other people grow in that way. What are some of the gaps that you've seen that they have to close before they can do that?
A lot of it is, I think for me, when I was also going into my leadership, it was about really understanding people management at different levels of, like I said, their confidence level or where they want to grow and their ambition or non-ambition. It depends on that person, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes down to the part, because I've been doing that for quite some time, and I'm like, I still need to work on, and I ask my own feedback. What feedback can you give me? So it's usually always a 360 feedback. I think that's something that leaders and managers should work on. Like, because we're so like, I know we try not to be at this hierarchy, but it's very nice to have a balance of equity here.
Yeah.
I would like feedback also. So because it's going to make you a better leader.
It's valuable.
Right? It's valuable.
Yeah.
And the other part is for me is that I believe when you're such the executor for so long, you don't see the cost. You're building, you're designing, your construction, right?
Yeah.
And I find a lot of leaders have the lack of understanding what cost is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It can be energy, time. It can be quite a lot of things, right? But the other part of that is if we are understanding cost and we're understanding energy and time, do we understand strategy then? Because maybe we're building so much strategy, we don't ever execute it.
Yeah.
And then that's a cost too.
Of course.
Right? It's the strategy sitting on the shelf. So what is it? SOSS. So it's very much of, I think in those categories, as many leaders as I try to work with at the senior level, the lead level, even the director level, the strategy piece is missing.
Yeah.
The other part that I think that most leaders just coming into their first job has to really understand how to build partnerships.
Okay.
Stakeholder management is one thing, but the other partnerships. So, for example, product design and development. You're going to have partnerships with customer-facing people. You're going to have partnerships with just pure engineering. Like, who is your partner in engineering? So you can assess the reality of getting something done on time or whatever the scope is, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have partnerships in design. You're going to have partnerships in sales. So whatever your other domains are, it's really crucial to have a coffee, get to know what their domains are capable of, but what they're inspired to do, because maybe that feeds back into the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Especially for innovation, right? You're not just maintaining something, you're building some new concept and idea. And I think that leaders, we get excited about it, but I think that we can have stronger relationships with partnerships. And then there's a fine line to that. Too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So those are things we balance through. We get to know. We're like, all right, let's make a little prototype. Let's do it all in Figma before we actually have conversations with anyone.
Yeah.
So because visuals and videos, they help tell the story a lot better. So I always, when I'm building something and it comes down to your point of really understanding what you need as to grow, I typically build my own sort of prototypes around it. And then I actually execute it to team members. If it's just a sketch, it could be a napkin sketch, giving that too, because I'm like, this is now a tool to tell that story.
Yeah.
And it helps drive those conversations, right? So, and that's just because of the domain that I'm in. Other people may have something quite differently. They might just have a PowerPoint and be like, these are kind of the thoughts that we have. And that still is strategy. So the more strategical work is being done, the more you're ready to be at the next level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the emphasis and highlight what you mentioned about people management as well. Because most of the time, if you're working through and across departments adjacent to kind of your skill set, you need to collaborate. You need to cooperate with each other. There needs to be a win-win. I think those are the best situations. And usually you can create a win-win. It's just by virtue of doing it the right way. Because if you're like, no, I need this from you, then all of a sudden you give someone a task and they have to do it. Otherwise, like something doesn't happen. That's not really a win-win. But if you come to someone and say, I have this idea, what do you think? Then they start kind of co-creating. Then it's the idea together. And all of a sudden they run for you and you run for them. That's a win-win.
That's a partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As truest as it can be. That is a partnership.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so as well. In kind of this conversation, talking about true leadership, there's also one thought I had that I love the things you lay out. You look for communication in skills to develop, or more hands-on things in kind of the spire diagram you make with people, the focus on empathy, and transparency as well. But there's not every manager or not every leader is like that, right? You have the typical kind of manager that does bunch up the feedback and gives it to you in kind of an end-of-year review. I don't know how to change that. But I do see and perceive that behavior within other organizations. Like it's interesting because I have the point of view of a consultant, so I see that sometimes within organizations, and that's a hard change, especially from kind of bottom up, creating change like that, because I feel like that trickles down from top down rather.
Right, but you made an interesting point. So, and this is there's a definition of you're a manager versus a leader, right? Managers. Not every manager, so I won't kind of generalize it in that way, but you're managing. Yeah. You're managing schedule. You're managing projects, products, or, but then you have the leader kind of mindset where they're like, yeah, we're all managing this. You're responsible. And this is kind of the vision. This is where we're going to get there. We're going to start from here. We're going to get there. And then there's a combination of both, right? Because you need to manage how it's being processed over time. Yeah. Ways of working, collaboration, empathy. But empathy would go with leadership, right? So dividing that up and knowing when you're a manager, when you're a leader. And I think that helps a lot, especially, and then it's also the wanting of it. If you are a manager and you're like, that's really not my thing, I'm not that kind of empathy type of person, then that's how your leader style is.
That's fine.
Right? Yeah. That's fine. I think just, again, being transparent about that. But I also believe that there's a responsibility the higher you go up. And that responsibility, and this might backfire on me, but that's okay. This is my true self, is that you have to have some sort of empathy, right? You want people to follow you, whether you're at the manager or the leader level, you must empathize with them and understand them. Yeah. And this is not sympathy. This is like really understanding, like, okay, want to understand you. Maybe I don't understand the full thing, but how do we progress? Because when those situations do not play well, their next card is HR, right? And there's probably times before it got that bad to like kind of intervene a bit. And then granted, you can't save everyone. You can't manage everyone. You can't lead everyone. Yeah. But at least you tried. And I think from being in an international company, I learned that a lot. I was like, okay, yeah, this is not the U.S. It's not at will. People can put their guard down a bit. Yeah. You can really get to know them.
That's good.
You still have a job tomorrow, okay?
That's good.
You still got a job for at least 3 months. Yeah. So it's very good to like really appreciate both styles of management and leadership. But at the same time, I think a lot of self-awareness of what type of leader do you want to be. So, and we have our own mentor. Like, I want to see myself in you and I want you to see yourself in me, right? So what leader in this organization do I admire that I want some mentorship, maybe even sponsorship, which is quite different, but I want to be an apprentice to that person because I really resonate with their leadership style. And I think that's the responsibility. It's growing, even though because I've had managers who are like, well, I'm a manager now. I don't really need to grow anymore.
No, I've
right?
made
I'm
it.
done.
This
right?
is it.
You're like, people are different and they're going to always be a challenge with humans, right?
Yeah.
So.
I love the focus on empathy. I think without empathy, you can't be a great manager. Like I hate it when people say resources when they're talking about people. Because it's people, right? Why do we talk about resources? Like even the word HR, I'm like, some companies say people team. I like people team.
I like people with people culture. Right, the people culture team. Yeah.
So
absolutely,
it all trickles down, and it boils down to empathy. I feel like building up those relationships allows for trust, allows for transparency in the first place. People to believe you and stand behind you, and then you can do the thing. Get it? Go get it.
Yeah. Go get it. Get push and get out.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Keeya. Thank you.
Same here, Patrick.
Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been an honor.
This was a blast.
Thank you.
Is there anything you still want to share before we round off?
I'm all good. I think every time I think about these kind of conversations, when I have my empathy on, I come back to the same sort of like end statement was get seen, stand up and get out there. Don't forget your passions. Have a passion project on the side. Bring that passion to work and just kind of keep going with the things that drive you the most, right? So for me, it's just be you, be as authentic as you can be, build that trust and just step forward. Right.
Be you and be as authentic as you can be. I love that. Cool. Then I'm going to round it off here. I'm going to put all Keeya's socials in the description below. Reach out to her, let her know you came from our show. And with that being said, thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next one.